Welcome to the Higher Ed Geek podcast, where we explore the impact of EdTech on the student experience with engaging, fun, and relevant conversations that honor the wide range of work happening all across the higher ed ecosystem. I'm your host, Dustin Ramsdell. I've been working in and around higher ed for the past decade, focused on student support and digital experience. Join me every week for discussions with some of the best minds in education technology who'll be bringing you their perspectives on how digital transformation is reshaping the way we recruit, engage, and graduate learners. You'll hear firsthand accounts of how institutional leaders are developing their strategy, as well as get deeper on the stories of how these EdTech tools are being built to foster better student outcomes. With that, let's get to today's episode.
Welcome, everyone, to another bonus live episode of the Higher Ed Geek podcast, recorded here at the eduWeb Summit in Orlando. This is going to be our next to last episode recorded here. If you're following along, just a lot of great conversations happening, here in the podcast and across the show floor and everything else, all the networking. Been a great time here. But I am here with Toni. If you want to briefly introduce yourself, kind of your background, but then also, I was seeing that you won an award from AMA. A lot of folks, I think, are aware of that organization. But can you just talk about that? Because it's a really cool, awesome, unique thing as you kind of just go into more of your background and your current role.
Yeah, absolutely. So hi, I'm Toni Marie, and I currently lead marketing and communications for Fordham University's Career Center. So my role mostly focuses on strategic initiatives. I work across current students, employers, alumni, some development work, some prospective student work, you name it, I've probably touched that audience, all the platforms, all the mediums, all the campaigns. It's a really exciting job because there's so much to it, and no two of my days are alike. I've been working at Fordham for just about 3 years now, and prior to that, I worked at a very small liberal arts college, my alma mater, Manhattanville University. I was in their central marketing office. I helped with their rebrand from college to university, did a huge web project, super exciting. And then I'm also currently a grad student with the University of Florida Online. I'm doing my master's in mass communication and digital strategy. So very fun. And yeah, I was a finalist for the American Marketing Association, a Emerging Marketer in Higher Ed Award. So I essentially just submitted a proposal over the summer because I had some downtime. Why not? Let's just try it. And essentially talking about a lot of my work in audience segmentation, CRM, and really just how to better humanize marketing, particularly retention marketing strategies, since I feel that's such a blind spot in higher ed. And oddly enough, my very first higher ed job was I was a marketing manager for my undergraduate career center as a student worker, so part-time managing their social media and their YouTube. And since then, I've just been there's so many gaps here that you have all of these people doing incredible work, but it's just not connecting from department to department. So how can we do a better job of that?
Yeah, that's awesome. Well, yeah, we're going to be focusing on that retention marketing piece, because I thought that was super cool and unique. And our first conversation, if folks are following along, is a embedded marketer in a student affairs division. So just the idea of obviously all those sort of unique aspects of, I think for better or worse, a lot of, air gets sucked out of the room of enrollment marketing, prospective students. And, that does take a lot of energy, resources, manpower, kind of finesse and everything. But I think it's, my background is definitely much more in the, student support realm. So it was very heartening to see, you presenting on that, Dan, presenting as well, kind of in his lane. But you've done some writing on it that we'll link out to just in case folks want to kind of get that. Like I said, your session, I think, we'll be able to share out some of those resources with folks as well. But it's also retention marketing is important. And that I'm glad that you felt, I guess, passionate enough or confident enough to kind of be hey, I think I'm doing something that's novel and important and all that, kind of seeking out that recognition to hopefully just, kind of start more of these kind of conversations happening to normalize it, but then hopefully, kind of motivate and inspire folks to kind of get into the work. Yeah.
As you said, there's so much of an emphasis on what I call enrollment marketing and advancement marketing, and both of those are hugely important. And this is what I talked about a lot in my presentation, but we spend so much time and money getting students in the door, and especially with the enrollment cliff, we have to. It's not an optional task. And then for advancement marketing, you need to connect with alumni and donors to keep the work that you're doing going. So you make all these promises and you're hoping on delivering on all these promises so you can tap into that to get funding. But then the actual world where you're trying to tap into and deliver on that promise, there's no really real structure. At least enrollment and advancement, they have kind of a consistent structure across higher ed. It's not a monolith, but everybody kind of has a universally accepted vision of what it usually looks like. Retention marketing doesn't have that. And one of the things that I very much noticed in my role that was at first a challenge, but I try to turn it into an opportunity, is the fact that there aren't a lot of people out there like with jobs like mine.
Right.
There aren't a lot of people who are dedicated marketing and communications professionals that have the background, the degree, and the work experience working in those capacities, because they're usually in other capacities. And even at my previous institution, most of the people who were doing marketing and communications work were doing other jobs and overseeing a student intern to do social media or doing something else that like it was the add-on, not the focus. And especially as the enrollment cliff is coming and there's fewer students in the door, we have to keep them there. And even on just a human level, college is a massive investment of time, of money, of resources. The numbers are one thing, the data is one thing, but it hurts my heart to see students not be able to stay at an institution that they once fell in love with because they couldn't find their place, because they didn't feel they could access the resources that they were promised. Like, we want to see them succeed. We want to see them finish. So I personally also believe it's not a luxury to keep students engaged and to keep students enrolled, and that, we do need to lean more into that to help them across that finish line. And, it's just the right human thing to do.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And clearly you are very passionate about this, kind of getting on your soapbox. We love it. And I think, obviously, again, you're kind of speaking on this at this event, and we're kind of halfway through the second full day of the event. Just, if you want to speak to your session more in particular, which again, we'll link out to some resources that folks can check out on that. But what brought you to the event? Like, any reflections, kind of takeaways so far of what you've kind of been partaking in at the event?
Yeah, so the one thing I will say I found really interesting from this conference in particular, and this is the second conference I've attended, the first one I'm presenting at, that there is a real interest in this type of work, that people really want to figure out how they can do better by their current students. And that was really refreshing to see, because so many of the resources I see online and even so many of the professional organizations are very focused on other areas. And like, if there is a student success professional organization, it's more for student success practitioners. But I was really pleasantly surprised how many people were interested in the work and are really engaged at looking at, it's not just about discoverability, but it is also about, building community, continuing engagement. And there was a session I was at earlier today where the big takeaway was, how do you keep the momentum you've built once you've got it started? Because once you lose that momentum, you don't get it back. So there's been a lot of talk about AI, which I think is really interesting. It's been a huge topic in a lot of my grad program as well. So there's been a lot of overlap there. And for me, it's really interesting, like being a grad student at the same time. And my program is very diverse. Like, I've taken classes in advertising and PR and copywriting and UX, and it's a very broad program, which I love, because I very much view integrated communications and marketing as just that, as integrated. So it's fascinating to see that SEO, AEO now requires PR, which used to be a separate function from marketing. But was it ever really separate, or did we just think about it that way? So I like the fact that, it's a lot of information to take in, but I like the fact that we're challenging norms, we're challenging conventions, and that it's not the old higher ed stereotype of, oh, we just do it this way because we've always done it that way. That's a terrible answer. Even if it works, we could always do it better. I come from the dance world. I'm an ex-ballet dancer. My teachers taught me nothing else. It's that you will never be perfect. You will never be the best. You can always be 1% better. And even just that 1% can be a great feeling.
Yeah, that's a great way to look at it. And I think, kind of that idea, I guess, of the interest, the curiosity and all that. Because I think, any event like this is always good for sort of the normalizing of struggles, or sort of, kind of the camaraderie, and the idea that, I think it's probably a very kind of universal experience that retention marketing is like an other duty as a sign for, some people kind of being like, yes, I want to be able to do this more, do it better, and maybe just recognize the importance that much more, and maybe advocate for more resources, a dedicated person to do the work, and all those sort of things. But I feel like just to make sure that we can capture it very succinctly, because I think we've just been kind of alluding to retention marketing. Do you have in your mind the sort of elevator pitch, or a textbook definition of what you feel is indicative of that, or how you maybe because obviously retention is I guess the goal or the metric or whatever, but if somebody were to say oh, I've never heard of that before, what does it mean? Just to make sure, I guess, we have that sort of captured here, that somebody else might be hey, I went to the session, or I was talking about whatever. I'm sure there is still a little bit of ground to the idea of oh, that's what that is, or I've done that, or whatever else. But how do you kind of come at that sort of like definition, I guess?
So I think the most accurate way to put it, because there's a lot of different angles you could take that look different at different types of institutions as well. But the broad parent umbrella definition that I think works for everybody is retention marketing is the marketing and communications practice you do in between enrollment and before advancement. So after a student has signed up and they've started at your school and they've said, I am committing to this institution, and before they graduate, what all of the marketing and communications that happens to your current student population within those 2 to 4, maybe 6 years, depending on what the program looks like. So it's combination of academics, student affairs, student success, and it really takes a look at how do you connect all of these siloed operations and create a single relationship with the student to make them feel seen, heard, and understood, and connect them with the resources, tools, and people they need to succeed at the institution. So what I often think about it as, enrollment does a wonderful job of summarizing everything your institution has to offer. We get a nice booklet that says we offer career services, we offer clubs and extracurricular involvement, we have all these majors and minors, and it makes it look like the university is one nice, big, happy family. Then you come to the institution and academics is doing their own thing, and it's not even academics as a monolith. Each academic department is doing their own thing. Sometimes, even with my own grad program, like, it's the University of Florida College of Journalism and Communications, but then there's so many different programs under that College of Journalism and Communications umbrella. They're all kind of doing their own thing, and that's separate from career services and separate from extracurricular involvement and separate from mission and ministry and spiritual enhancement. So how do you bring all of these things together so students aren't seeing it as 15 different offices, but as one total experience to elevate them? And I think one of the best ways to kind of start looking at how your retention marketing looks is to take a look at the number of Instagram accounts that exist at your place. So at my previous institution, this was a really interesting exercise as we were rebranding, is we had to do an inventory of every single institutional Instagram account and whether it was active or not. And it was the same thing at Manhattanville as it was at UF, and it's the same thing at Fordham as well. There would be academic divisions that have an account and then different programs that have an account. And even if the program has an account, maybe the different majors in that track have an account. And then every single different office has an account. And it's not just on Instagram. It is also in your emails. It's in your flyers. It's in every single type of communication you have. And, yes, you might have an institutional-wide events calendar, but is that doing the work it needs to do? Or are you just info dumping 1,000 events a semester for students to kind of navigate on their own? So retention marketing is getting all of that streamlined and getting it to be a good, positive user experience for students to navigate all of that.
Yeah, and I think just even connecting back again, there's a pretty clear, I guess, line between the episode that we did with Dan that definitely encourage folks to check out if they're interested in this, because it's the idea of, like, I would imagine in a perfect world, this work would live in a like student affairs marketing kind of like position, office, team or something, because they would hopefully have kind of like the visibility into like, okay, these are all the resources, and, be able to like kind of appropriately promote those. And I think even to like kind of your point, there's always, there's not going to be like the one and only way of like, well, I guess what, we just have one Instagram account for the entire institution?
No.
Like kind of like you have to just sort of adjust and, certainly based on the, the size of the institution or different things like that, you can figure out, what makes sense for, I think there's always going to be the tendency of like, okay, that's too much. Like that's always going to be like the danger red zone. Like, but then there's certainly going to be a less likely scenario, I guess, of like too few,
Yeah. There's not like a hard number.
Right. Yeah. There's not going to be a perfect science to it. But
this is what we did at my previous institution too. Like when we were going through all the Manhattanville Instagram accounts, we actually made a policy where new accounts that wanted to be made had to be run by central marketing. So we had to approve whether you could create an account or not. And it's not because we wanted to be the brand police and say, oh, you can't do that. But, some of our healthcare programs, they wanted to create so many accounts. We're like, well, do you have the means to sustainably create content? Like, can you realistically see yourself putting up 1 to 2 in-feed posts and 3 stories a week? And if the answer is no, it's like, well, then that's not going to be a good channel for students to get that information. What's a better way of doing it? And sometimes it was, well, there's 3 programs that are all very similar and a lot of the information they'd be sharing is the same. So if there's information overlap, how can we kind of optimize that so it's not this 3 different accounts? But because this was also like before collaborative posts sort of thing. But it's like if it's the same post going up regularly from the same 3 accounts, maybe you merge those accounts together. Or if you only have things to share out twice a year, maybe that goes on the main marketing account. Like, it's not a number, it's not the most, it's not the least, it's what's the best avenue for what you're specifically trying to accomplish.
And I think my follow up on that is like, because I had sort of the question of like, you know, what do you feel like folks tend to miss with this kind of work? 'Cause I think there is like one that kind of like, you know, that notion, sort of how you're getting out of like, you know, there's sort of a certain way to do things and we always do, you know, you can keep with that. And it certainly is a place for that, I guess, of just sort of like, you know, traditions, I guess, you know, consistency. But the other idea being that like institutions will invest in all these different resources and ways to support, engage students and build community, whatever. But it's the idea of like, hey, we've built it, like, and we told them about it once during orientation, they will come, right? Like they, you know, but the idea of like trying to be more proactive and also more like timely, you know, like certain things are just going to make way more sense at a particular time in an academic year or a particular time in a student's, you know, journey through the institution, whatever, as they're like, you know, likely, you know, prioritizing one thing over another. So I guess just speaking to that, because I think you're, you know, explaining it as like a pretty broad umbrella, like, and I think there's even, I guess, just sort of, again, say like how many accounts or whatever, like that will be kind of somewhat in the eye of the beholder of like, you know, the right number there. But then the idea of like, okay, we, you know, are a like liberal arts college out in the woods somewhere, like community building is going to be a really powerful driver of retention marketing. So I think like one, just sort of like speaking to proactive versus reactive, the sort of like timeliness, and then the idea of like, yeah, just the idea that like it shouldn't be maybe intimidating, that it can be encompassing of so much, I get like. So like whatever maybe your flavor, your priority, or, you know, at the institution might be. So I guess that's like trying to put some color and shape and form to like what a retention marketing, you know, campaign might look like.
Yeah. And what I'll say is, again, a lot of it depends on the institution type, but I always think about it from the student's perspective, that students aren't going to want 50 emails a day. So really like putting yourself in your student's shoes and seeing what do they need to get the information that they need, essentially. So are your emails working, but they're just getting too many of them? Are they not getting enough? Are they getting too much? So, you know, really auditing and even talking to your student workers about this. I mean, my student workers are extremely vocal about what they like and what they don't like. And I'll even give the example of like, one of my very, very good friends at work is a relationship manager, and he is an expert at it, and he is everything we want to see in relationship management. He has helped hundreds of students get their dream jobs, and he's helped hundreds of employers get their dream candidates. For a while, and actually up until the last few months, he was responsible for sending out his own emails to promote his events. He's not a confident writer, admittedly. Like he says, I'm not a strong writer. I don't enjoy writing. Like this isn't my strong suit. So he would send out emails that like every subject line was like, last chance, sign up today. And the entire email was bolded, highlighted, and underlined. And it was very overwhelming. But then students wouldn't be opening it because after you received your third last chance email, you probably don't think it's your last chance. So I've been helping him kind of improve his emails, and we're starting to look at a new workflow for the upcoming year. But the work he was doing was critical for students' development. He was getting students for site visits, coffee chats, like one-on-one small group interactions with employers to get them hired at very competitive companies. But students weren't realizing the work he was doing because it wasn't being conveyed in a way that was meaningful to them. So it's really, and our students were so clear about that. They were making memes, like bullying him on the internet. And he's the sweetest guy, but his emails came across very intimidating because it's like, this guy's just always last chance, all caps. And it was a lot. And so looking at it just from the student's point of view, and like even looking at things like Reddit threads about your institution, what questions are people asking that you feel they don't need to be asking? That's the information gap you have, and your retention marketing is the gap to close that. So some of it is looking at your existing automated notices, like whether that be in financial aid, in the registrar, and looking at the tone and the frequency of that. Because, you know, all of us have multiple systems through the school, but are students getting like maybe 2 or 3 emails about the same issue from 2 and 3 different departments? That's confusing because who do you go to for that? So my perspective on it is really just getting what you currently have going up to baseline, and then looking forward and looking ahead. I mean, that's more of imagination playground, as I would say. I don't know if we're necessarily there at Fordham yet. We're working towards it. And I honestly haven't seen a lot of schools that are at that point yet, but really examining how student newsletters could and should look, how different university-wide calendars could and should look, like what is unified, what is segmented, and what kind of support and structure do you have? And to your point, there's a lot of blind spots that people aren't considering with this because it is new work. But I would say the biggest one is that people kind of underestimate, at least in central marketing, how much structure and guidance these teams need. And I'm not saying that is a bad thing, but at my current institution, at my previous institution, there's a sentiment that central marketing doesn't want to be the brand police and they don't want to be in charge of everything because they can't handle being in charge of everything, nor should they. However, there's almost an air of when you leave it open to collaboration and creative liberty, it's a little too laissez-faire. And the staff that are on the receiving end are trying to interpret brand guidelines that they don't know how to interpret because they're not trained in that way. And, you know, maybe they need a few more templates, maybe they need a few more resources just to help get them going. Maybe if it's even just a consultation at the beginning of the year. But I think just being able to be even just a little bit more hands-on with the people actually doing the work to say, hey, you have the best of intentions here, but the way it's coming across isn't matching your intentions. Have you considered X, Y, and Z?
Yeah, I think that's like helpful advice, that idea of like, if you are not sure where to start with this, that idea of try to, you know, identify those information gaps and, just general feedback on preferred modalities, cadence, or, you know, things like that. But then, yeah, I mean, I think there would be other areas around, like, you know, if you just do general surveying, like students might just indicate like they don't feel like a sense of community, belonging, or, you know, they're confused about one thing or the other. Like just like kind of give them the platform to sort of tell you versus like kind of, because I think, yeah, like maybe the information gaps wouldn't be as, you know, visible or apparent, you know, but I think, yeah, it's like fair to kind of just be like, what feels unclear, you know, in terms of like the resources that are available to you. And
it's something, even in our office, it's something we didn't even have to survey students on 100% to understand that they weren't understanding it. It was us talking to the career counselors and say, hey, like, what are students asking you about over and over again that you feel they shouldn't be asking in an appointment but should know beforehand? And it's like, okay, well, they don't know that resume templates are available, for example. So why don't we edit the appointment pre-reminder email like, hey, like your appointment's coming up, see you soon? Why don't we, for resume appointments, why don't we include the link to the resume templates gallery so students can start taking a look at it? Even little things like that help immensely because it gives people the ability to act and not feel like they're waiting for something. And again, keeps them more engaged in the process, and then the quality of conversation they have with their career coach is so much higher because it's not, let's start your resume from scratch. It's, what are you really interested in and how can we get you there? So, you know, making the operational things humanized, but operational and not, you know, not everything needs to be a high-touch engagement point, but the high-touch engagement point needs to be really high quality.
Yeah, that's a good point too, I think, because that would be part of where this, I would imagine, feels like daunting or intimidating to people, is that idea of like, you know, if you're not able to, like automate, segment, sort of like, have workflows or sort of processes and stuff, that it would just be, idea if you're trying to kind of share out resources or, you know, be more proactive, that it would have to be like, like super manual or whatever. Like if you can embed, you know, sort of triggers or something to share something timely, proactively versus, like, okay, resume templates, like, we have them. They're great. Students love them, whatever. But like, you have to keep like doling them out every time like someone asks versus it being like, just kind of embedded in something that, just creates a better experience all around. Because I think that's always kind of the thing, is the idea of like work that you would do in this area of, you know, managing your website and your, you know, communications, whatever else, like should help to then enable, those like super kind of high impact, high touch kind of experiences versus like, they're coming for support from a career counselor and they haven't even looked at a resume template or they don't even know, like, so then it's like, okay, well now we have to spend like half of this meeting or the entire meeting, like,
literally just starting a Google
Right.
Doc, which is something that a student could have done beforehand, and they probably wanted to do beforehand to feel a little bit more productive. But it's the same conversation we had about our own programming. I mean, our office, we had an over-programming issue we're still working through. But when half of the programming we were doing that was eating up time and space for higher quality programming was things like resume and cover letter workshops, that's an everyday need. That's not just a one-off workshop. So how do we make that an everyday met need? Rather than telling students, oh, like, why don't you come to this workshop in 2 weeks? It's like, here's a YouTube video that you can watch on your own time. And then the live programming becomes more engaging because it's panels and networking events and things that can't be on demand. So it's like also balancing what can you make on demand versus what should never be on demand, because not everything should fall into one bucket or the other. It has to be a balance of both.
Yeah. And I feel that, there's just so much here, which we could talk for a very long time about all this, but it's sort of this like kind of all the above sort of thing is that like, yeah, retention marketing is not just one thing in terms of like the modality and all those sort of things. It's not just, career services or just using that as an example. It can be, course registration advising. It could be, the community building, like student leadership stuff. But the idea of like all of that ends up in the student retaining because they're getting their problem solved. They're, being successful in their courses. They're, just like getting what they need when they need it, how they want it, like all that kind of stuff. So I think, it's something that came up in the other interview that you're sort of speaking to is that the idea of there needs to be the balance of the subject matter expertise in marketing and all these sort of best practices just generally that like fundamentally are going to be, applicable even in this kind of unique context. But then the subject matter expertise on like all the resources, the people and, all that kind of information. So then you like put those together and you're like, really enabling, the high level retention marketing work that every institution, again, in some shape or form should be putting the resources behind and everything. So, and
I really view this to that point where communicators are the translators of that information, that they're not necessarily the ones developing they're not the ones developing the programs or the policies or anything, but they're the ones translating it to make it understandable, approachable, and human. Because honestly, the people who are developing the program should be able to put their full attention and focus into developing the best programs and the best policies possible. And then someone whose entire skill set is in translating and simplifying that should be. And it is a partnership because the subject matter expert in the program or the policy is the one ensuring accuracy, but then maybe the communicator comes back and says, well, this step, no matter how I simplify it, is still a little unclear. Do we want to just take a look at that? And like, it balances friction both ways, which I think is a really beautiful, healthy balance when done correctly.
Mm-hmm. I love this stuff. We can talk about it for a while. We'll ask our final two questions here.
Yes.
Certainly encourage folks to, check out the article you wrote, check out your, session materials and stuff if you're interested in this. But like, I think, it's, super important work, a lot of nuances, a lot of stuff. But are there trend lines with this work or just other sort of marketing, higher ed stuff that you're kind of eyeing on the horizon that you feel like people should know about?
I really think that all of the conversations about AI are also bringing up conversations about authenticity and humanity. And that's really what I'm interested in, because college is a huge investment, again, of both time and money and other resources. And it is a distinctly human experience in the respect that there are plenty of opportunities for students and young people, or people of all ages really, to learn what they want to learn, self-paced online for free. I mean, YouTube's a great resource. There's so many opportunities to learn that college has to deliver an exceptional experience to be worth it. Like, we're not just selling an education anymore. We are selling a total development experience. And there is tech that can support that and needs to support that work. But at the end of the day, students are coming to develop relationships with people. And those people are their advisors, their professors, mentors that are alumni. Like the list goes on, but it is a distinctly human experience. So how do we retain that humanity in a world that is increasingly tech-driven, increasingly automated, increasingly, AI-driven, when there's almost an AI fatigue in some areas? And young people in particular are very good at spotting AI, anything, and they're very quick to call it out. So college isn't inherently the spot for AI everything, but how do you balance the operational demands that AI can meet while still being distinctly human and really focusing on those relationships and the total developmental transformation that kids are looking for?
Yeah, and I think it is just, I don't know, because I think there's maybe sometimes like friction or frustration, the idea of like, student preferences and like, what their expectations are. But it's kind of like, hey, like they're keeping us honest, like they're holding us to a high standard. Like we absolutely should and can, meet that and adapt and sort of evolve as like an institution in terms of like all this kind of stuff. And I think, and it's even something where like we didn't even really touch on this too much, but I think making a clear case in terms of like return on investment and stuff in terms of like the, the institution spending the money and putting the effort in to retention market, like the idea of like, okay, if we are having happier students that are retaining, succeeding, graduating, and all that, like we're retaining all that like tuition revenue and whatever, so the idea of like, I talk about that a lot sometimes with different things where it's like, you know what, if I'm having to like convince some higher ed leader, in an institution that they should invest in this, like, I don't care how you come at this. If you're just the dollars and cents of it, it's like, oh, if we spend this money to do this and then like students persist and keep paying tuition and like, all right, cool. Like that's a good use of our resources. Like, awesome, great. If you like the, warm, kind of like, oh yeah, because we want to do right by the students and, whatever else. And like, so I think there can always be a lot of good, justifications, I think, for this work.
No, it's expensive work. And I'm not going to pretend like it's not a big effort and it's not cheap. Like, I'm not going to pretend. But if done correctly, retention marketing can be the heart of all other marketing operations, because at the end of the day, you're selling the current student experience to prospective families. So the more robust and correct and accurate and clear materials you have, that makes your enrollment marketing easier, but then you also have more stories and more to tell to your alumni and your donors. So there is so much overlap in the work you're already doing. It's not that the pieces don't exist. It's like connecting the wires to make all the electricity flow. It's there, but how do you just bring it out and make it shine? It's like working with a student that has a lot of confidence, like lacking confidence. All the pieces are there, but how do you make it shine?
Yeah, love a good metaphor. I think that one works very well. And we will wrap up now. A final question, asking everybody advice that you would give to other higher ed leaders navigating this moment.
Really focus on the humanity of it. And I'm not just talking about in your audience, I'm also talking about in your staff. It is a very difficult time for everyone. Your students are navigating a new world, as they always have been as young people growing and developing. Your staff are also navigating a lot of change, and it can be very difficult. But when you put your community first and your people first, you will find success, everybody will shine, and everybody will thrive. And I think sometimes it's easy to lose sight of that, because especially when you have, there's so much talent in this industry. When you have these talented people that you think can just be autonomous, making sure that you're still checking in on them and still that they have everything that they need and they have their questions answered to the best of your ability, at least. Because the better that they can do, the better that they can do by your students, and then the better your students can do. And it's just... this is a community industry. It is an industry, but it is community first, and really just keeping that on the focus line.
Yeah, and I think like what sticks with me with this kind of stuff too is like, obviously you want to be like responsive to problems, and like the proactive piece is huge, but then like the idea of, I guess kind of the way you're saying, the sort of like the 1% better is even like if I'm not hitting roadblocks as a student, like preventing me from registering or this, that, the other, like there could be things that are like unknowns for me that could like elevate my experience, get, even more value out of it, of like getting involved with something and, getting out of my comfort zone and growing as a person, whatever, versus just like, well, yeah, they're taking classes, they've passed the classes and like, there's no problems, but it's like, yeah, that they're kind of at a baseline now, but like, how can we elevate?
Yeah. Are they getting the most out of their experience?
Right.
Are they making the most of what they have to offer? Because again, a student could be passing all their classes, doing well, they could be in clubs, but still have no clue what they want to do with their life. And then every time, every day you get closer to graduation, it's another stress of, I don't know what comes after this. And like something still feels like it's missing. It's not a checklist. And, I'm a big data person. I like looking at the data. I like examining the data. But there's so much story between and beyond the data. And I really wish more people would dive deep into that.
Absolutely. Well, all really great stuff. Again, encourage folks to check out everything. We're going to link in the episode description. Connect with Toni Marie to keep the conversation going. But just thank you so much for taking a few moments out of a busy conference day to chat with us here for the podcast. And just really great stuff.
Thank you so much for having me.
Thanks for listening to the Higher Ed Geek podcast. This show is a proud member of the Enrollify Network, home to Higher Ed's largest collection of podcasts. Enrollify is where higher ed goes to grow. So be sure to check out our other podcasts, webinars, video clips, blogs, and more. Visit Enrollify.org and subscribe for all the latest details and content drops directly to your inbox. Enrollify is brought to you by Element 451, the digital workforce platform for higher ed. Learn more at element451.com.